Well, I'm here again. And I said I wasn't going to do this again until I did something with this laundry room, but I'm back because I have something important that I want to share with you about pre-washing and how I pre-wash and when I pre-wash. So if you'll give me just a couple of minutes, I'll explain that to you, and I'm going to include you with a little test I'm doing on some fabric that I just bought. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Okay, we're back in my ugly laundry room again, and I'm sure you might have one just like this, but the purpose today is to talk about pre-washing. And let me tell you why. I am going to be working on a probably 70 by 70-ish quilt later this year that's going to be two color, and it's going to be red and white. And if you've had the kind of experience I have, you know that red is one of those colors that bleeds a lot. And I want to make sure that these two fabrics get pre-washed before I do anything. So today is the first step here. I purchased fabric yesterday from Joann's, and I purchased the So Classic fabrics. Now, I've worked with their Country Classic fabrics before and didn't really have much of a problem with them running, but they don't sell those anymore. Now they have the So Classics. So we're going to pre-wash the fabrics. I've already washed the white, and it's in the dryer. That's what you hear going. But I want to wash the red, and this is their Scarlet Cover, their Scarlet Cover fabric, and you can tell just how red that is if we get it in some good light. It's got a lot of dye in there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash this and dry it, and we're going to see what happens. Now, what I like to do sometimes when I'm using a really dark dyed fabric like black or red, or sometimes even a really bright dark blue, is hook it to the fabrics that it's going to be attached to when it's sewn together, so I can tell two things. Number one, is the colored fabric bleeding, and is the light fabric attracting and holding on to those dyes? Because you've got to really have both of those things happening before you get a quilt that bleeds. Because frankly, if the red bleeds but it doesn't collect on the white and stay there, who cares, right? You just don't want to wash anything else with it, but at least for that quilt it shouldn't impact it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash this red, and I'm attaching two fabric samples of the white to it. This one was cut off of the fabric that they gave me from the store, unwashed. This one got washed, and it's almost dry. It's a little bit damp still, but I don't think that's going to matter. And I'm going to take and safety pin this fabric to this material, because I want to see if it's going to pick up that dye, and I also want to see if it is touching, if the white fabric is touching the red when it's wet. Is that going to have a problem? Because I've always said, where's my other one, that when you wash a quilt, one of the things you want to do is as soon as it finishes spinning, get it out of the washing machine and start drying it. So that means take it out and to get it in that dryer, or get it placed where you're going to air dry it or hang it on the line or whatever you're going to do. But don't let it sit wet in the washing machine, because those two fabrics touching each other just make it really super easy for the dye to jump from one to the other. So we're going to wash this. This is 4 yards of the red. And I do like it to be all separated when it goes in. It's going in by itself. And we're just going to use some regular detergent. Average amount for a regular load. And we're going to wash this on warm, because later on when this quilt gets made and we put it in here, we're probably going to wash it on warm. I don't want to wash it on hot, because I'd never wash this quilt on hot unless it was particularly stained with something that needed hot water. And I'm sure you can use your imagination and figure out what that might be. But for most quilts, that's going to be the exception. So we're just going to run a regular load in here and let this wash. Now, like I said, we've attached 2 white samples to it. Let's stop it just a second. I forgot something. We're also going to put some color catchers in here, and I think I'm going to put, I've got 3, so I'm going to put 2 in here, and I'll hold on to that 3rd one. Okay, now we're going to let it run. Warm water, normal soil, high spin speed. So this would be how I would wash that quilt once it's made. And we're going to let it run, and as soon as it stops, I'm going to pull it out and turn the camera back on and show you what the color catchers look like and what the cloth samples look like. And that will tell us a lot about how we need to proceed. This just made its noise. It finished spinning. So we're going to pull it out. And remember, we washed this on warm water, regular load. And let's see what we have. We had 2 color catchers in here. There's the other one. Okay. So here is our fabric, and I don't really notice anything different about the fabric. It looks like it's pretty much the same color, maybe a tad brighter. And then here are the 2 pieces of fabric that we pinned on. We have the one that had never been washed, and that's that one. And we have the one that had been pre-washed just before this load. Okay. So here they are. And I'm going to put these pretty close under the light for you. And here's a nice white towel. Now, I'll tell you what I see. In all of the areas where it was cut and there's a little bit of fraying, it did pick up a little bit of the dye, and it's hard to know if that's actually lint or it's picking up the dye, but I see a little bit of transfer maybe on both of them. Really no difference. Maybe a little bit more dye in the unwashed one, but really not that much. Now, how do we know if it was bleeding or if it was releasing dye? Well, we can tell that from the color catchers. What's my microphone doing here? It feels like it's tumbling around on me. Sorry about that. So these are pink. They're truly pink. So it picked up a lot of dye. So I'll tell you what I think I'm going to do, because this is going to be a large quilt and there's going to be a lot of red. There's going to be as much red as there is white. I'm going to wash it again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the dryer and dry it and then wash it again. And when I wash it this time, I'm going to put 1 more of these in here, and then I'll just report to you later how that color catcher was the second time. My guess is that the second time we wash, this is just going to be really light red because it's probably let off most of what it had and it just has a little bit left. And remember that drying process should kind of set it in place just a little bit as well. So that's what I'm going to do this afternoon. It looks like it's the day of washing fabric. We did 5 yards of the white earlier, and we've got 4 yards of this. And so we'll do that and see what it went. But really, when you think about how these could have looked, the fabric versus how the color catchers look, it's really not that bad. And like I said, it could be that some of that transfer is just in the lint that the fabric is letting off, or the lint that was on the white fabric. So we'll give it another run and see what happens. Well, hi everyone, I'm back again to let you know what the status of this pre-washing is. And this has been a marathon event for me. Now, as you recalled, we washed it one time and we used the color catchers. That was this. And one of these kind. So we were still getting the pink. And on our sample white fabric, we got a little bit of transfer, but not a lot. So here's the story of how many times this thing has been washed. I washed it on a regular load, that's 57 minutes. And then I washed it on a short load, that's about 30 minutes. Still getting color transfer on the sheets. And the, what is the name of this? They're Carvana color grabbers. Grabbed a lot more ink or dye than the Shout color catchers, which was kind of surprising to me. And still, we were getting a pretty good bit of color transfer doing this. Okay, so the 57 full wash, the 30-minute short wash. I ran it again on a 30-minute short wash, and it finished up, and the color catcher in there was still fairly good color pink, so it's still losing dye and picking that up. So before it spun out, I just set the machine on a full wash with a soak, and that's an hour and 20 minutes. So it's run through an hour and 20 minutes. Now if you're keeping track, that's 4 washes. And here's the color catcher that came out on that last wash. And it's darker than any of the others. So clearly the sitting in the water for the extra period for the soak allowed more dye to transfer to the color catcher, or the color grabber, I think they're called. So here's what I'm going to do. Given the fact that not much of the dye transferred to the white fabric in the very beginning, I'm going to wash it one more time and call it good. And if I've got some vinegar here, I might drop a little bit of vinegar in the wash just kind of as a safety measure. I don't know if it'll do anything or not, but I'm fairly confident that at this point we've released enough of that dye out of the fabric that it shouldn't be too harmful to what we have going on. And it may be that the next time I'm running something in that red family, that I'll just throw in a little sample size of the red and the white again and see what happens, just to kind of check on that. Or I may cut 2 little samples of the red and white and wet them and just let them stay wet, touching each other for a couple of days and see what happens. I think we're okay, but that's just a little extra level of safety that might help me feel better about not doing a whole lot of work and then having a messy quilt after a dye transfer. So sometimes you just never know. I never would have expected that after 4 washes, it's still transferring dye, but it is. And the good thing is we saw that first wash that not too much of it was picked up by that white fabric. Now, one caveat to this is when I was at Joann's, some of the Kona fabrics they had, the white Kona, is specifically designed to absorb dye. So you don't want to pick that up by accident if you're selecting white cone of fabric. Hi everyone, it's Kim and I'm back in the studio and I've got a follow-up on this red fabric. Now let me bring you up to date. It has probably been close to a week since we started washing this fabric. And we washed it and we used color catchers. And you can see this is one of the earliest color catchers, which I find really interesting. And then we had some others that we used along the way. And these are the ones that we used. Now I don't know, I didn't number them as we were going because I really didn't expect to have this kind of issue. But you can see we've got all different colors of the color catchers. And then I do recall this is the next to the last wash with color catchers here. I recall it because it had the little tie off there on the end. It got caught up in the raveling edges. And the last time, well, let's see. It washed at least 5 times. And that 5th wash I put in addition to my detergent, I also put in probably a cup total vinegar with that. I put in some in the wash and then I put some, well, let me back that up. I put vinegar in the fabric softener area, in the actual tub of the machine, and I put it in the bleach container that would have given it bleach or vinegar in this case at the end of the wash. That was all washed, right? And we were still getting this in the color catcher. And generally, if it were fabric that I was using in a small portion of the quilt, I would have said, that's enough, we're good to go. But because we're going to make a quilt that is purely red and white, I'm a little concerned. So I went one step further and washed it one more time. And I washed it again and I used 2 more of the color catchers. This was with the vinegar wash, and this is what came out. These color catchers, even after all these were done, those color catchers got even more of the color transfer. So I do believe, number one, that the vinegar helped the color to dissipate, and that's why we're catching it. And because nothing was in the machine with the red, there was nothing for the color to stick onto. Okay, so then I washed it one more time. And I washed it yesterday and did not take it out of the machine. I left it in the machine overnight. And then this morning, when I went to the machine, it's still in the machine, it's been there. And this time, when I washed it, let's see if I can find it, I cut another sample of the white material and pinned it to it. So it washed yesterday with this pin to it, sat in the machine all night long wet. And then this morning, I just ran it through a quick wash and dried it. So all of these have already been done, right? I did not put any color catchers in this last time. What's the sense? But here's the piece that we ran through. I'm going to take this off. And I want to set a piece of white. This is not the same fabric. This is a different fabric. But this is just a piece of white muslin. And that's the piece of fabric that got washed with the red. And I think I'm seeing the same thing I saw the first time I washed it with the little white sample in it, is that we get a little bit of color transfer here where the edges have been cut and it's beginning to fray. It captures a little bit of it there along the edges, but in the middle I don't see it. And if I cut a fresh edge, I don't see it there either. Once I trim that off, I don't see it. So I think we're good. I'm going to stop washing this now because I'm afraid I'm going to wear it out before I even get the first piece cut. So I think we're good. I think you can see that as well as I can. In fact, let's see if we can. That might have been a little fast for you. Sorry if it made you dizzy. But that's the piece that was washed in with it. And you might can see just a little bit of a tint here on this frayed edge. Maybe a little bit here, but very, very little. I'm going to bring the light over even a little closer. This has been a great experience to see how colors work with color catchers, the effect of vinegar in with our detergent. I know a lot of people sometimes use salt too. I chose not to use salt in my machine because I didn't want to take the chance of damaging my machine. And there are chemical additives that you can add to this that also will either enhance the ability of the fabric to release the dye or keep the fabric from releasing the dye. I didn't have either one of those, and my guess is that you probably don't either unless you've run into a problem like this and had to buy it to fix a quilt. So I chose not to go that route. But I think we're good to go. And I think we're good to start pressing these 5 yards of red fabric. And we'll just see once we get it made if it fades, if it bleeds. I really don't think it will, but we'll see. It's been washed in warm water. It's been washed in cold water. It's been washed in room temperature water. It has not been washed in hot water because I would never wash any of my quilts in hot water unless there was some type of biological item or residue on it that I needed to get rid of for a safety reason. Otherwise, I would never wash it in hot. And I would hope that I could be able to, in other ways, disinfect or sanitize that quilt without having to go to hot water. Thanks for joining us today. If you like this video and you found it helpful, give us a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and consider a membership. We'll see you next week at the Shamrock Quilt. We'll see you next week at the Shamrock Quilt Studio.